Hi, today I'm going to do a brief introduction to opening up a Photoshop file. I will eventually be doing another video on creating basic masks. So let's begin. First of all, I want to establish that I am using Photoshop 2019, so you might be using an older version. Your setup might look a little bit different, but if your version isn't too old, you should be fairly close to what I have. So I'm going to start by creating a new file. Hit Create New, and you'll see when you open up a new file that you have a variety of different types of format you can select from. What I would like to do today is I would like to set up one for print, and go ahead and select that. Now you'll notice we've got some standard sizes here for print. I am actually going to make some alterations on that, but let's take a look here. We have the width and height, the orientation, and you'll notice that it's in inches. Now, let's say for whatever reason you need to change that, you just simply click on the little triangle there and up pops this menu with different types of measurements. But we're going to stick with inches today. I'm going to actually be making this 14 inches wide by 11 inches tall. So there's that. I'm actually going to make the resolution 100, and I am going to stick with RGB. There are some advanced options down here, but as we won't be using those in this class, I'm going to go ahead and just leave that as it is. Once you've got this all set up, go create. Now, I use Photoshop a lot, so I kind of customize how I like my interface to look. But let's go ahead and get our interfaces to at least look the same to begin with. So I'm going over here and I am selecting Essentials. Now what I want to do is I want to reset Essentials. Let's go ahead and click on that. Okay, so you see I've got several different palettes up now. I believe that the default now is to show rulers. I think in older versions they don't automatically have the rulers, but let me show you how to get about that. If you don't have rulers, you go to View, and then you would select rulers. Just to show you what it looks like without rulers, I'm going to deselect that. Okay, but I love working with rulers, and I totally recommend that as well to you. So I'm going to go back and put that on. Now another thing that I like to do is I like to have my toolbox set up a little differently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put my pointer tool on this gray section here, not on the arrows. Okay, I'm going to grab that. I'm going to bring it over. And another thing that I actually like or prefer is I like to have this as a double set instead of the long single one. And again, this is strictly your preferences. But to get that done, I just click here. Okay, if I want to go back to what it looked like before, click on that. Now, if I hit this, I'm going to be closing it all together. Let's just do that so you can see what happens. It happens sometimes. You're busy, you accidentally click that off. How do you get that back? How do you get that toolbox back? Well, you go into Windows and you come down here and select Tools, and there you go. Now, palettes. Now, there are different types of working formats that you can work with. So for example, let's say I am concentrating on 3D, which I won't be doing in this class, but let's say all of a sudden I've got a different format. Let's say I am concentrating on painting. Again, a different format altogether. So I'm going to go back to Essentials. So we're all working from at least we're all starting at the same place. So there are obviously several different types of palettes up here. For example, the library palettes, the layer palettes, which I'll be using. One palette I don't see that I will want to use today is the history palette. So I'm going to go to Windows and I'm coming down to select history. Now, there are palettes in here that I will not be using. For example, today, I will not be using the library palette. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come to this little area here, 3 or 4 little lines that are parallel to one another. I'm going to click on that, and I'm actually going to close the whole tab group because there's nothing in there that I need. Another thing that I do not need at this point is I do not need channels. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to click just to close that. I may be using paths, maybe not immediately, but I may be using those. I will be using properties, but I will not be using adjustments, not today at least, so I'm going to close that. Now, one thing I do want, I've got history right over here, so I'm going to drag that over here. Okay, so this is a good place to start. So now, to use the rulers, what you do is you simply drag, click, and drag. Click and drag. Same thing on this side. Click and drag, click and drag. Now let's say I do not want to see my rulers at all. I'm going to go ahead and go to Show, Guides, and if I deselect that, there we go. We've still got the rulers, we don't have the ruler guides. If I need to see them again, Show, Guides. There we go. Let's say I just want to get rid of some of them now. This might change again from version to version. It used to be that the default was that these were locked in, but I believe that has changed with, has definitely changed with 2019. So I go ahead and select that and I try to delete it, and obviously it's not working. Love it when things don't go the way you planned it. Okay, well, here's another thing. Just grab it and throw it off the page. How about that? Grab it and throw it. Okay, there we go. So we've covered rulers and guides. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make some basic shapes and fill them. I'm going to go ahead and make the shape, go to Edit, Fill, and I'm going to do that with the foreground color, which is black. Okay, so a couple different things. You can see that this one is selected. Well, maybe it's not that easy to see, so I'm going to go ahead and change the color. There's a few different ways to do this. One that I tend to do is I tend to double click on the color that's there and pull up this palette here. Now you can see as I move this, I get a variety in the colors. I am going to go ahead and select this one. Say OK. So now that's my foreground color. I'm going to go ahead and select, Edit, Fill, and there we go. Now another way to do this is to go ahead and make a circle. How about that? You'll see over here, I'm actually going to pull it over here so you can see. See how that color has changed? Let's see here. See how it's changed? This is another way to go about doing that. Okay, so actually I wanted to make that a little lighter. There we go. Okay, so you can see these little moving dash marks. And what this is telling you is that this item is selected. Sometimes people call these moving ants, but this means that this is selected. So if you wanted to deselect this, what you would do is you could go to Control D, which deselects. Now I'm a PC girl, so I'm going to just shoot out the PC keystrokes, but Control D is what that is. Let's say that I want to get rid of an item. Oops, sorry. Just joking. Okay, so let's say I want to get rid of that. One way that I can do that is to go ahead and do Control Z. Oops, sorry. That's taking a step back. Undo fill. Or another way that I can do this is I can go to the history palette. Now if you go over here, I'm going to pull the history palette up. Here are the things that I've just done. You can see there's a grayed out, meaning that those are the things I just did. I'm going to actually click down here. Let me actually go down here. Got the whole thing back. And let's say I want to go back to here. Okay. Now I can still do this as long as I don't do any actions. Okay. So this is one way to do it too. Now let's say I want to deselect this. I think I've said this earlier, but all you do is do Control D, and there we go. Last but not least, and I'm just going to touch on this very briefly, are the different types of modes. There is bitmap, which is black and white. There's grayscale. There's RGB, which stands for red, green, blue. And there's CMYK, which stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and kettle black, which is an old term for the ink that they used. So for the most part, what I would do is I would use RGB because it has the largest color mode, the largest selection of color. Now, if you're going to print right before printing, you will convert that to CMYK. But as this is a non-print class, we will not be converting to CMYK. We don't have reasons to.